across 7 spiral arms, through nebulae that birthed civilizations and devoured others. The hegemony's crimson banners flew above worlds that had forgotten the taste of rebellion. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, methodical, ruthless, and absolutely certain of their superiority. But today, in the obsidian halls of the War Conclave, that certainty trembled. High Stratarch Sinithis stood before the holographic display, her chitinous exoskeleton catching the pale blue light of distant stars. 8 feet of evolved perfection. She was the product of millennia of genetic refinement, faster than thought, stronger than steel, more ruthless than the vacuum of space itself. Her mandibles clicked in a rhythm that her subordinates had learned to fear. It meant someone was about to die. "Explain," she hissed, her voice like breaking glass, "how a species that has not even achieved faster than light travel has managed to repel 3 separate incursion forces." The chamber fell silent. Around the circular platform, the greatest military minds of the hegemony shifted uneasily. War Commander Zelanathi, whose tactical genius had reduced the Andromedans to cosmic dust. Battle Sage Morketh, who had orchestrated the consumption of the Whirlpool Galaxy's outer rim. Fleet Admiral Cook Sandra, whose armadas had never known defeat. All of them stared at the spinning hologram at the chamber's center, a small blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, Earth. The human's Zandra's translator crackled as her tentacled form undulated with agitation. Possess no coherent military doctrine. Their technology is primitive. Their societies are fractured by endless internal conflicts. By all calculations, they should have surrendered within 1 solar rotation of first contact. Zinktint is secondary arms gestured sharply, and the hologram zoomed in. Cities sprawled across continents like bioluminescent infections. Oceans teemed with microscopic life. Ice caps reflected starlight like frozen tears. It was a beautiful world, the kind the hegemony typically preserved as a trophy after conquest. Yet our scout fleets reported something unusual. Selenithi interjected, his synthetic voice modulated through speakers embedded in his crystalline skull. The humans fought with a ferocity that defied their apparent limitations. Ships that should have been destroyed continued firing until their reactors went critical. Soldiers who should have fled instead charged into certain death, often taking our forces with them. A low thrumming filled the chamber as High Stratarch Xanthithis activated her analysis implants. Data streams flowed through her consciousness. Casualty reports, tactical assessments, intercepted human communications. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. "Show me the Phobos engagement," she commanded. The hologram shifted, displaying the small moon orbiting the human's 4th planet. What had been intended as a simple forward base establishment had become a meat grinder. Human forces, outnumbered 3 to 1 and outgunned exponentially, had held their position for 73 standard hours. They had used improvised explosives, converted civilian equipment, and tactics that bordered on suicidal madness. In the end, the hegemony had taken Phobos. But the cost had been unacceptable. They called their homeworlds something in their primitive languages, Morketh observed, his ancient voice heavy with contemplation. Terra, Earth, Gaia. But there is another term they use when speaking of it in the context of war. He paused, accessing his linguistic databases. Death World. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Zintis had encountered death worlds before, planets where evolution had run wild, producing ecosystems of unimaginable lethality. Usually they were quarantined. The few species that managed to evolve on such worlds were either too primitive to be threats, or too specialized to survive off their homeworld. The humans were different. "They are primitives," Korvax Injure insisted, her chemosynthetic skin flushing with agitation. "No matter their origin, world's classification, they remain technologically inferior. One proper battle group could what?" Xanthith's mandibles snapped shut with the sound of breaking stone. "End up like Battle Commander Thaximil's flotilla? Disappeared entirely while investigating their outer system? Or perhaps share the fate of War Chief Clyden's ground assault forces, found dead the last soldier, their positions overrun by humans using projectile weapons and sharp metal implements? The silence that followed was pregnant with unspoken fear. For the first time in 10,000 cycles, the hegemony had encountered something that made them hesitate. Not because the humans were stronger. They weren't. Not because human technology was superior. It was laughably primitive by galactic standards. The humans were dangerous for a far more unsettling reason. They simply refused to die properly. Every species the hegemony had conquered understood the mathematics of warfare. When casualties reached a certain threshold, when supplies ran low and defeat became inevitable, they surrendered. It was logical. It was rational. It was how civilized beings conducted themselves. The humans appeared to have missed that particular evolutionary memo. There are reports, Zelanathi said slowly, of human soldiers continuing to fight even after sustaining injuries that should have been immediately fatal. Medical scans of recovered human corpses show evidence of adrenaline and endorphin levels that would be toxic to most species. They appear to be biochemically adapted for sustained combat in extreme conditions. Deathworlders, Morketh murmured again, the word carrying new weight. High Stratarch Xanthithus studied the spinning blue marble of Earth with new eyes. Intelligence reports spoke of a world where the dominant species had evolved alongside predators that dwarfed their ancestors. Creatures with fangs longer than swords, toxins that could kill in seconds, environmental hazards that would sterilize entire hegemony colonies. Yet the humans had not merely survived, they had thrived, eventually becoming the apex species on a planet that seemed designed to destroy them. What did that make them now that they faced a truly existential threat? The ruling council grows impatient, Korvaxandra observed, her translator adding electronic undertones of unease to her words. 3 failed incursions reflect poorly on our competence. They are demanding results. Xanthithus nodded slowly. The ruling council, ancient beings who had transcended flesh millennia ago, existing now as pure intellect within quantum matrices, did not tolerate failure. Their patience was not infinite, and their punishments were creative in their cruelty. Then we shall give them results, she declared, her voice carrying the finality of a collapsing star. Assemble the Ghost Protocol assets. The effect was immediate. Every being in the chamber, creatures who had faced cosmic horrors and dimensional abominations without flinching, took an involuntary step backward. The Ghost Protocol, elite units so classified that their existence was theoretical to most of the hegemony. Warriors selected from 1,000 species, genetically modified beyond recognition, trained in arts of war that predated civilization. They were deployed only when conventional conquest failed, when the hegemony needed to make a statement written in blood and terror. High Stratarch, Zelenathi's synthetic voice carried harmonics of concern. The Ghost Protocol has not been activated since the Void Wars. Surely conventional forces have failed since and kept him off. 3 times, against primitives who should have been subjugated by a single cruiser squadron. Her exoskeleton darkened to the color of dried blood. The humans want to play at being apex predators. Very well, let us introduce them to what actual apex predators look like. She gestured, and new holographic displays materialized around the chamber. Personnel files scrolled past beings of such engineered lethality that their mere descriptions were classified at the highest levels. Raktal the Worldbreaker, whose plasma claws could carve through battleship hulls like flesh. Nyx Vara the Silent, whose psychic abilities could drive entire populations insane with a thought. Jethamos, the Eternal, a being of living metal who had survived the heat death of 3 stars, dozen upon dozen of horrors crafted specifically to end civilizations. The Phantoms will be deployed within 7 cycles. Xanthithus announced, full operational autonomy, no rules of engagement. The humans wish to make martyrs of themselves. We shall grant them their desire. But first, they will watch their world burn. War Commander Zelanathi's crystalline features reflected the holographic displays like a broken mirror. And if the Ghost Protocol units encounter the same fate as our previous forces. For a moment, High Stratarch Xanthithus was silent. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 10,000 cycles of absolute dominion. Then the humans will have proven themselves worthy of extinction through orbital bombardment. Sometimes, War Commander, the only way to kill a Deathworld species is to kill their Deathworld as well. The chamber emptied quickly after that. leaving only the holographic image of Earth spinning in the darkness. Beautiful. Blue. Deceptively peaceful. Waiting. In the depths of space, far from the hegemony's obsidian fortresses, ancient systems stirred to life. Cryogenic chambers began their warming cycles. Weapon systems that had slept for millennia performed diagnostic checks. Ships darker than the void itself emerged from hidden harbors, their hulls inscribed with kill marks in languages that no longer existed. The Ghost Protocol was active. The Phantoms were coming. And somewhere on that small blue world, in cities and towns and hidden bunkers, human beings went about their daily lives loving, laughing, dreaming, fighting, creating, destroying, utterly unaware that they were about to face an enemy designed specifically to be their extinction. But perhaps that was exactly what made them dangerous. The universe was about to find out. High Stratarch's Intense remained in the empty chamber long after the others had departed, staring at the slowly rotating planet that had become the hegemony's first real challenge in 10 millennia. Her mandibles clicked in thoughtful rhythm as she contemplated Tiquity and its price. Outside the chamber's transpersteel windows, the stars looked different somehow, less certain, less permanent, as if something fundamental in the cosmic order had shifted, as if the hegemony's age of unopposed dominance was coming to an end. The holographic Earth continued to spin, beautiful and blue and completely unaware that its fate had been sealed by creatures who considered themselves gods among the stars. But fate, as any human philosopher could have told them, had a way of rewriting itself when least expected. The phantom ship Void's whisper materialized at the edge of the Sol system like a wound in reality itself. No sensor could detect its approach. No warning system could track its passage. Built from materials that absorbed energy across the electromagnetic spectrum, crewed by beings who existed partially outside normal space-time, it was less a spacecraft than a manifestation of calculated death. Captain Vrektul stood on the command deck, his massive frame casting no reflection in the polished surfaces around him. 10 feet of bioengineered perfection, every cell of his body had been rewritten by hegemony science. His plasma claws could melt through 3 feet of hardened steel. His enhanced nervous system could process tactical information faster than most species' computers. His bones were laced with quantum-aligned metals that made him virtually indestructible. He was the perfect weapon. And he was beginning to suspect that wouldn't be enough. Passive scans complete, reported his tactical officer, Nix Vara. Poitras fact. Where Vraktul was imposing physical presence, she was barely there at all. A wraith-like figure whose psychic abilities had been honed to kill with a thought. The humans have established defensive positions throughout the system, primitive but extensive. The main display showed the inner solar system and tactical overlay. Mars bristled with weapon emplacements. The asteroid belt had been turned into a maze of hidden bunkers and gun platforms. Even the outer planets showed signs of militarization. Gas giant moons converted into fortress worlds, orbital shipyards producing vessels of crude but effective design. They've had time to prepare, observed navigation adept Krexenil, his forearms working at control interfaces with mechanical precision. Intelligence estimates suggest they've been fortifying for 3 cycles since first contact. Rilatul's claws extended slightly, a sign of mild irritation among his kind. 3 cycles was nothing. Most species required decades to establish meaningful defenses, yet somehow these primitive humans had transformed their entire star system into a fortress in less time than it took most civilizations to draft preliminary defensive protocols. "Show me their fleet positions," he commanded. The display shifted, highlighting the scattered formations of human vessels. Vraktul had studied the technical specifications during the journey from hegemony space: crude fusion drives, primitive kinetic weapons, armor that was barely more than refined metals. By any rational measure, a single phantom ship should be able to destroy the entire human fleet without sustaining damage. So why did looking at them make his enhanced survival instincts whisper warnings? "Sir," communications specialist. Larine's synthesized voice carried harmonics of confusion. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It appears to be a greeting." Rikatul's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Put it through." The transmission crackled with primitive electromagnetic modulation, but the translator matrices quickly rendered it comprehensible. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Catherine Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human space. State your intentions or prepare to be fired upon. Silence fell across the Phantom Bridge. In 10,000 cycles of hegemony expansion, no primitive species had ever issued an ultimatum to a Ghost Protocol unit. The sheer audacity was fascinating. "Shall I respond, Captain?" the Rin asked. The Void's whisper began its deadly dance inward, sliding between planets like a knife between ribs. Vrogoktul watched the tactical displays with growing interest as human ships moved to intercept. Their formations where newer hegemony doctrine emphasized overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. The humans seemed to favor independent action and aggressive maneuvering. "First contact in 73 minutes, Krexnil reported. "Sir," Nixavara's ethereal voice carried new undertones. "I'm detecting something unusual about the human crews. Their psychic signatures are intense." Vrogoktul turned to his tactical officer with interest. Nixavara's telepathic abilities could read the emotional states of most sapient species from considerable distances. Her analysis had been instrumental in previous Ghost Protocol operations. "Explain." "Fear. Yes, that's normal. But also, excitement." "Anticipation?" Her translucent features flickered with confusion. "Most species facing us experience terror, despair, resignation. These humans seem almost eager." Before Vrogoktul could respond, proximity alarms began screaming. The tactical display erupted with new contacts. Human ships emerging from stealth positions throughout the asteroid belt, their primitive sensors somehow having tracked the Void's whisper despite its advanced cloaking systems. "Impossible," Krexnil muttered, his forearms dancing across control surfaces. "Their sensor technology is centuries behind ours. There's no way they could." The first salvo of human kinetic rounds hammered into their shields. Individually, the projectiles were pathetic, chunks of dense metal accelerated by chemical explosives. But there were thousands of them, arriving in carefully timed waves that stressed the Phantom ship's defenses in ways no single species had managed before. "Return fire," Vrogoktul ordered, calmly. "Target their lead vessels." The Void's whisper's primary weapons, particle beams that could carve through planetary crust, lashed out with lethal precision. They struck home, tearing through human armor like tissue paper, gutting ships with surgical strikes. And the humans kept coming. "Sir," the Rin's voice carried electronic harmonics of disbelief. "The ships we destroyed, their crews had time to evacuate. Life pods are heading for the nearest human vessels." "Let them go," Vrogoktul replied, though something cold was beginning to coil in what remained of his stomach. "Focus on the primary threats." But as the battle continued, it became clear that the concept of primary threat had no meaning in human tactics. Every ship fought with the same desperate intensity, regardless of size or armament. Cargo vessels rammed Ghost Protocol fighters. Medical ships provided covering fire for military destroyers. Even evacuation craft turned and fought when cornered. "Captain," Nixavara's voice was strained now, her psychic abilities overwhelmed by the sheer emotional intensity radiating from the human fleet. "They're not afraid of us. They should be afraid. Every species is afraid of us. But these humans, they're angry." Vrogoktul paused in issuing orders, his enhanced consciousness processing this information. Fear was a tool. It made enemies predictable, caused them to make mistakes, broke their will to fight. But anger made enemies dangerous. "New contacts," Krexnil reported, his synthesized voice tight with what might have been concern in a being capable of such emotions. "Human reinforcements arriving from the outer system. And sir, they're not running standard approach patterns." The display updated, showing human ships diving in from impossible angles, trajectories that should have torn them apart from gravitational stress, courses that brought them within lethal range of their own weapons' blast effects. It was suicide. It was also tactically brilliant. They're using the sun's gravitational well to accelerate, Vrogoktul realized with growing admiration and unease. Slingshot maneuvers at velocities that should liquefy their crews. "Sir," the Rin interrupted, incoming transmission from one of the human vessels. It's a recording." "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the comm system was young, female, crackling with static from massive electromagnetic interference. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jennifer Rodriguez of the UEDS Indomitable. If you're receiving this, it means our ship has been destroyed and our message beacon has been activated. To whoever finds this, we held the line for 47 minutes against an enemy that could have destroyed us in seconds. We held it because behind us are 6 billion human beings who deserve to see tomorrow. We held it because sometimes the only victory possible is to make your enemy remember you. We held it because we are human, and that means something." Rodriguez out. The transmission ended, leaving the Phantom Bridge in stunned silence. "How many human vessels have we destroyed?" Raktul asked quietly. 67 confirmed kills, Krexdinel replied. "How many humans have we captured?" "None, sir. They activate self-destruct sequences rather than allow boarding. Even their damaged vessels continue fighting until complete structural failure." Raktul stared at the tactical display, watching as the human fleet reformed around their losses without missing a beat. In his millennia of existence, he had never encountered anything like this. Most species fought to survive. Humans seemed to fight to matter. "Sir." Nexavara's voice was barely a whisper now. "There's something else. The psychic resonance from their homeworld. It's getting stronger. Billions of minds, all focused on the same thought." "What thought?" "Defiance. Captain Vraktul, perfect weapon of the hegemony, engineered killer without peer, found himself facing an enemy that his creators had never prepared him for. An enemy that refused to acknowledge its own defeat. And somewhere in the depths of his restructured consciousness, a new emotion began to stir. "Fear, all units," he ordered, his voice steady despite the growing certainty that everything the hegemony believed about warfare was about to be proven catastrophically wrong. "Prepare for close engagement. It appears the humans wish to teach us something about combat." On the tactical display, Earth continued to turn blue, beautiful and utterly unafraid. Behind them, the human fleet reformed, regrouped and prepared to die with their teeth in their enemies' throats. And in the cold depths of space, two philosophies of war, one based on calculated superiority, the other on impossible stubbornness, prepared to test themselves against each other. The universe held its breath. The real battle was about to begin. The battle for Earth's orbital space had raged for 18 hours. Captain Vraktul stood amidst the ruins of his command deck, green blood trickling from wounds that should have been impossible to inflict on his enhanced physiology. Around him, the void's whisper shuddered under impacts from human weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate its shields, much less its armor. But the humans had learned. With each wave of their attacks, they had adapted. Crude kinetic rounds gave way to improvised armor-piercing designs. Random firing patterns evolved into precise targeting of critical systems. Most unsettling of all, they had begun to coordinate in ways that suggested they understood phantom ship weaknesses that had never been documented in any intelligence report. "Status report," Raktul commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Hull breaches on 7 decks," Krexenel replied, his forearms working frantically to maintain basic systems. "Primary weapons offline. Life support at 60% efficiency. And sir," he paused, his synthesized voice carrying electronic harmonics of disbelief, "we've lost contact with the Shadow's Edge and the Death's Embrace. 2 phantom ships. Gone. In 10,000 cycles of hegemony expansion, no enemy had ever destroyed a single Ghost Protocol vessel. The humans had eliminated 2 of them in less than a day, using technology that barely qualified as spaceflight by galactic standards." "How?" Raktul asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Ramming attacks, sir. Both vessels were targeted by coordinated suicide runs. The humans, they filled their cargo ships with nuclear warheads and flew them directly into our hulls." Nixfara materialized beside him, her ethereal form flickering with psychic strain. "Captain, the telepathic resonance from the planet's surface is overwhelming my abilities. It's not just defiance anymore, it's something else. Something I don't have words for." "Try." Her translucent features contorted with effort. "Hope, sir. They still have hope. After everything we've done to them, after all the losses they've suffered, they still believe they can win." Braktul's claws extended involuntarily. Hope was dangerous. Hope made enemies fight longer, harder, with less regard for rational self-preservation. Hope was what had turned the Void Wars from a simple conquest into a thousand-cycle nightmare that had nearly destroyed the hegemony itself. "Sir," Lorraine's voice cut through his contemplation. "Incoming transmission from the planet's surface. It's from their planetary leadership. Put it through." The face that appeared on the main display was unremarkable by most galactic standards. An aging human female with gray hair and tired eyes. But something in her expression made even Vractil's enhanced nervous system register threat warnings. "This is President Maria Santos of the United Earth Government," she said, her voice carrying across space with quiet authority. "I'm addressing the commander of the alien fleet currently engaged with our defense forces." Vractil stepped forward, allowing the transmission system to focus on his imposing form. "I am Captain Vractil of the Hegemony Ghost Protocol. You will surrender immediately, or we will sterilize your world." President Santos smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Captain Vractil," she said, pronouncing his name with careful precision. "Let me tell you something about human beings. We've been fighting wars since before we could speak. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, plagues that killed half our population. We've fought each other, fought our environment, fought extinction itself." She leaned forward, her eyes reflecting something ancient and implacable. "But we've never ever fought for something more important than this moment. Every human being on this planet, 6 billion of us, has made the same choice. We'd rather die free than live as slaves. So let me make you an offer, Captain." Vractil's mandibles clicked with amusement despite himself. "What could primitives like you possibly offer the hegemony?" "A lesson," Santos replied, "about what happens when you threaten a death-world species with extinction. About what happens when you corner 6 billion apex predators with nothing left to lose." The transmission cut out, leaving the Phantom Bridge in ominous silence. "Sir," Korvaxnil's voice carried new urgency. "Massive energy buildup detected on the planet's surface. They're powering up something big." The tactical display updated, showing heat signatures blooming across Earth's continents. Not weapons, something else. Something the hegemony's sensors couldn't properly identify. "Analysis," Vractil ordered. "Unknown, sir. The energy patterns don't match any known human technology. It's almost as if they're charging up their entire industrial base." Before Vractil could respond, space around the Void's whisper erupted in new contacts. "Not ships, something far more primitive and infinitely more dangerous." "Sir," Loren's voice rose to electronic shriek levels. "They're launching mass drivers from the planet's surface. Kinetic projectiles on ballistic trajectories. Thousands of—" Vractil stared at the display in fascination and growing horror. The humans had turned their entire world into a weapon. Every magnetic accelerator they possessed, every industrial launcher, every piece of equipment capable of imparting velocity to mass, all of it had been retasked for planetary defense. "Sir," Nixavara whispered, her psychic abilities suddenly crystal clear as the human intentions became unmistakable. "They're not trying to drive us off. They're trying to destroy us completely. Every human on that planet has committed to the same goal, our total annihilation." The first wave of kinetic projectiles began impacting the remaining Phantom ships. Individually, they were insignificant. Collectively, they were a storm of death that no shield system had been designed to handle. "Evasive maneuvers," Vractil ordered, but he already knew it was too late. The humans had calculated their firing solutions not for where the Phantom ships were, but where they would be forced to go to avoid the overlapping fields of fire. They had turned space itself into a trap. "Sir," Krexeno reported with mechanical calm, "the nightmare's end has been destroyed. The bone harvest is venting atmosphere. We are the last functional Phantom vessel in the system." Vractil stood motionless as his perfect mission dissolved around him. The Ghost Protocol had been designed to face conventional military forces, fleets and armies, and rational opponents who understood the mathematics of defeat. It had never been intended to face an entire species that had collectively decided to commit suicide rather than accept conquest. "Captain?" Darine's voice was barely functioning now, damaged by the constant impacts against their hull. "Incoming transmission from Hegemony High Command. They're demanding a status report." High Stratarch Xanax's image materialized on the flickering display, her chitinous features sharp with expectation. Captain Vraktatul, report. Have the humans been pacified? Vraktatul looked around his ruined bridge, at his dying ship, at the tactical displays, showing the systematic destruction of the most elite military force in galactic history. Then he looked back at his superior, at the representative of a hegemony that had never faced true resistance, never encountered an enemy that preferred extinction to submission. No, High Stratarch, he said quietly. The humans have not been pacified. The Ghost Protocol has failed. The silence from the communication channels stretched like pulled metal. Explain, Zimthis finally hissed. The humans are not a conventional enemy, Vraktatul replied, his enhanced consciousness processing the tactical situation with crystalline clarity. They do not fight to win. They fight to ensure that victory costs more than defeat is worth. They have weaponized their entire civilization, turned their planet into a single massive fortress manned by 6 billion soldiers who would rather die than surrender. Another wave of kinetic projectiles slammed into the Void's whisper, and Vraktatul felt the ship's death throes beginning. High Stratarch, he continued, his voice growing distant as his life support systems began failing. I recommend immediate strategic withdrawal from this system. The humans are not worth the cost of conquest. The transmission cut out as the Void's whisper's primary power systems finally failed. In the darkness of his dying ship, Captain Vraktatul, perfect weapon, engineered killer, Ghost Protocol elite, found himself experiencing something no hegemony strategist had ever accounted for: respect for his enemy. Captain? Nixvara's voice whispered through the emergency lighting. There's one more thing. The psychic resonance from the planet, it's changed again. What is it now? Vraktatul asked, though part of him already knew. Pride, sir. They're proud of what they've accomplished. 6 billion human beings looking up at the sky, watching us die and feeling proud that they stood together when it mattered. Vraktatul closed his eyes. An unnecessary gesture for a being with enhanced senses, but somehow fitting. Any word from the other phantom ships? Sir Krexunal's synthesized voice was barely audible now. We are the last. The humans have destroyed the entire Ghost Protocol strike force. Outside the ship's failing hull, space blazed with the light of dying phantom vessels. Ships that had been designed to be invisible, indestructible, inevitable. Each one marked another impossible victory for a species that shouldn't have been able to fight back, much less win. Captain, Marine managed one final transmission. Incoming message from the planet's surface. It's a funeral dirge. The sound that filled the dying ship was unlike anything in Vraktatul's millennia of experience. Human voices, thousands of them, millions singing together in harmony across electromagnetic frequencies. No words, just music, ancient, primal, beautiful music that spoke of loss and remembrance and the terrible price of freedom. They were singing for their own dead. And Vraktatul realized with something approaching wonder. They were singing for his. Sir Nixvara whispered, her psychic abilities fading as the ship's power died. I can sense individual human minds now. They're grieving for us. Even after everything we've done, they understand that we were soldiers following orders. They hate what we represented, but they don't hate us. The Void's whisper shuddered one final time and went dark. Captain Vraktatul, last survivor of the Ghost Protocol strike force, sat in the silence and contemplated the impossible truth he would never live to report. The humans had not simply defeated the hegemony's finest warriors. They had defeated them while still maintaining their humanity. The funeral dirge continued, carried on electromagnetic waves across the void, reaching out to touch even dying enemies with something the hegemony had never understood: compassion. As consciousness faded, Vraktatul's last thought was a realization that would have shattered hegemony doctrine to its foundations. Perhaps the humans had not been trying to teach them about combat. Perhaps they had been trying to teach them about honor. The song followed him into darkness. And somehow it felt like forgiveness. High Stratarch Zane-This stood alone in the war conclave chamber, staring at the holographic display of the Sol system. Around her, the greatest military minds of the hegemony maintained perfect silence, the silence of beings who had just witnessed the impossible. The Ghost Protocol strike force was gone. All of it. Every ship, every elite warrior, every piece of technology that had taken millennia to develop, destroyed by a species that hadn't even achieved interstellar flight 3 cycles ago. Status of human losses, she asked quietly. War Commander Zelen Nuthy's crystalline features reflected the holographic light like fractured prisms. Approximately 40% of their orbital defense fleet. Unknown civilian casualties from the kinetic bombardment debris. But sir, he paused, accessing the latest intelligence reports. They're already rebuilding. Every human industrial facility that survived is working around the clock to replace their losses. And their morale, higher than before the engagement, Fleet Admiral Kukienza replied, her tentacles writhing with confusion. Intelligence intercepts suggest they view this as a victory that proves they can defeat us. They're calling it the Battle of Sol, and they're treating it as the beginning of their resistance movement, not the end. Xanthus's mandibles clicked slowly as she processed this information. In 10,000 cycles of hegemony expansion, no species had ever emerged from first contact stronger than when it began. The humans had somehow transformed what should have been their subjugation into a rallying cry for further resistance. Recommendations, she asked. The chamber remained silent for long minutes. Finally, Battle Sage Morketh spoke, his ancient voice heavy with unwelcome wisdom. Strategic withdrawal from the Sol system, he said. Immediate quarantine protocols. The humans have proven themselves too dangerous to conquer and too costly to destroy. We classify them as a restricted species and forbid all contact. You're suggesting we retreat? Xanthus's voice carried harmonics of barely controlled rage. I'm suggesting we survive, Morketh replied calmly. The humans have demonstrated something we have never encountered, a willingness to pay any price to remain free. They will fight until their star burns out, until their planet is ash, until the last human child dies with a weapon in their hands. The cost of conquering them would exceed the value of conquest. Xanthus stared at the spinning blue marble of Earth, her enhanced consciousness running calculations that all led to the same conclusion. The humans were not valuable enough as a resource base to justify the losses required to subjugate them. They were not technologically advanced enough to represent a future threat to hegemony expansion. They were simply inconvenient. Very well, she said finally. Solus system is hereby designated as restricted space. All hegemony vessels are forbidden from entering the system without unanimous approval from the ruling council. The humans have earned their isolation. As the war conclave dispersed, Xanthus remained behind, studying the holographic Earth with something approaching philosophical curiosity. Somewhere on that small world, 6 billion humans were going about their daily lives, loving, learning, creating, dreaming, completely unaware that they had just redefined galactic politics through the simple expedient of refusing to surrender. The hegemony would survive. It would continue its expansion in other directions, conquering species that understood the rational mathematics of defeat. But it would do so with the knowledge that somewhere in the void there existed a species that considered freedom more valuable than life itself. The hologram flickered and stabilized, showing Earth in perfect detail. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in atmospheric patterns that had remained unchanged for millions of years. Beautiful, deadly, human. The universe had produced many wonders in its long existence, but perhaps none so dangerous as a species that could look extinction in the face and respond not with fear but with defiance. High Stratarch Xanthus deactivated the holographic display and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. Behind her, darkness claimed the space where Earth had been, but somehow the memory of that small blue world seemed to linger in the shadows. Somewhere in the void, humanity continued its ancient dance of survival, love, and impossible stubbornness. The galaxy was a little less safe for it, and perhaps in ways no hegemony strategist would ever understand, a little more beautiful as well. The stars looked on in silence, keeping their own counsel about what the future might hold. But one thing was certain. The universe had learned something new about the species that called itself human, and it would not forget.